Hey there folks, and welcome to the video. In the background you might hear my cat purring away because he's decided that he's going to sit on my lap while I record this. And let's talk about F1's Flexi-Wings. It's an ongoing debate regarding Red Bull, and we're sort of for the first time that we're discussing Red Bull and flexible wings. But let's talk about the gist of it. So right now there's an ongoing debate in Formula 1 talking about flexible aerodynamics, typically the rear wing. The idea being that under certain amounts of stress, the rear wing on the Red Bull will be able to flex, and so the downforce properties will be able to change. That might mean lower drag at the back of the car, maximising top speed. Might also mean the changeable properties mean it's good in the lower speed corners at providing downforce, and in the medium it changes a bit, then at the high speed it does what it needs to do in terms of keeping the car planted, but doesn't cause any unnecessary drag. Which is well, that's the theory, and to be honest, it's not something you're ever going to get rid of in F1, no matter how stringent the testing. That said, in 2014, Red Bull fell foul of the rules of the Australian Grand Prix with their flexible front wings, meaning a disqualification was in place for their drivers at the time, Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo, though I believe it was only really Ricciardo that was affected. I think it was, second place? That put Kevin Magnussen onto the podium on his Grand Prix debut. But yeah, the concern is that what happens when you bring in a mid-season rule change? And the racist Gary Anderson said, oh, back in the days of Bernie, you'd have it being sorted out in a room. To be honest, you wouldn't always have that. I mean, look at BAR, for example, 2006? 2005. I think it's 2006 where they ended up getting themselves banned for the fuel load to Tibulla. Ended up picking up like a one-race ban. It's not always so clear-cut that, you know, this will actually be dealt with outside of any kind of FIA court or whatever. But the problem is like Katz decides that he's going to now try and eat the microphone. That well, from Gary Anderson's verdict of the race, because I've been reading his theory on it. His problem is that it's an in-season rule change. This has been something that's consistent throughout Liberty stuff. I mean, you could look at that with Ferrari and the testing when it came to them burning oil and their so-called illegal engine. That was in-season change. I think it was in-season changing twice even to be able to try and rein in Ferrari. And do you know who was in favour of that? Red Bull. How about, I mean, it's not technically in-season because it was before the first race of the season, DAS. Red Bull protesting Mercedes dual-axis steering. Again, that happened technically mid-season. It was after Australia, and it would have been the midpoint of the actual F1 season. But, of course, it technically was pre-season. And so those kinds of clarifications, even though it's technically done at testing, were also done in season. As were, last season as well, the engine mode bans. The ones that came in place for Monza. And it's not even just like when we talk about the Liberty era of F1 where we see these kinds of things happening as well. It's something that is quite common in Formula 1 to see mid-season rule changes. And especially when it comes to things like this as well, because they want to try and prevent people from breaking the rules. But at the same time, F1 currently has a little bit of a quandary. You see, the last few they've done have been to try and rein in the fastest team, which typically has been Mercedes, or in the case of, say, 2019, Ferrari. Because they may not have been necessarily winning the title, but at that time, the Ferrari-powered cars were the ones who were at their best performance. Or at least notably compared to what the other teams were doing. So it was necessary for the FIA in that case to try and reel them in. But here, Red Bull is potentially fighting Mercedes. And as Mercedes, they're making the complaints. So they're less likely to listen to Mercedes as a result. Which, I've got to be honest, I'm a bit disappointed in. I mean, I get the idea you don't want to be in favour of mid-season rule changes. I understand that as a premise. However, this is something that is part of F1. If you want to say that it needs to stop, then make it stop for 2022. Gary Anderson is saying bring in this rule for 2022. No, make it stop for 2022. Because that would be changing the structure of what F1 is. F1 is always inherently political. It just so happens that what you talk about as the politics of F1 has changed over time. But this is the kind of politics that F1 used to find itself embroiled in. I mean, think Stephanie Gate. That was, or Spygate, you know, that was another example of that. there are all these kinds of examples of F1 being so intrinsically political and seeing all these kinds of judgments and so on. But apparently this one's one too far. It would be gutting if it's a thing that ends the kind of battle that we're seeing in the championship because the tests weren't stringent enough. But at the same time, if they're doing something illegal, then it's on them, you know? I mean, even if it is that the rule change deems it illegal. Because they were jumping up and down when Ferrari got in trouble. So, it's... What did somebody who's in a Renault powered team say? Karma. You know? It's karmic retribution. Because they've been there going in and saying, oh, there needs to be more done, there needs to be more done, and when more is done against them, they end up falling foul. It's inherently political. And it might be silly to have an in-season rule change, but both, again, are key to Formula 1. And on that note, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you around.